Welcome to the Firestarters video series. My name is Steve Scheier. I talk and I write about power with leaders in cannabis to help them tap into their power and empower others and achieve their most important business goals. I do this by offering my clients leadership guidance and by creating curated advisory boards for the leaders I serve. I'm also the author with Michael Ashley of this recently released book, Power Up Essential Tools for Cannabis Business Leaders. It's available on Amazon, and if you'd like to improve your leadership capacity, I'd encourage you to give it a read. Our guest today is Bethany Gomez. She's the managing director of the Chicago-based market research firm, the Brightfield Group. Bethany, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you on the show. So much of business is metrics and understanding the consumer, and I'm so glad that you're going to be on today to talk about that. But before we begin, let's start with the first question, which is, Bethany, what is the state of the cannabis business?
It's a great question, Steve. There's a lot of things happening in the cannabis business, right now, and we really see kind of a tale of two industries to some extent. On the West Coast, we have a lot of really great product development, product innovations, new brands really kind of fighting it out in a very kind of crowded market, and a lot of them really kind of struggling to be able to kind of rise above and build the brand that they want to be in an area with very dense competition. When we kind of look east of the Mississippi, or really kind of in more of those new and emerging markets, we see this path with MSOs really kind of shaping the market in land grabs to be able to pull out and extend into as many different states as is humanly possible, and really drive to build that national footprint and that really kind of national brand, both at a branded products lens, but also from a retailer lens. So, the market is really shifting in cannabis, and it's shifting from being very kind of commodity based and all about just getting products to market, the amount you can cultivate and bringing that into to a store, and really being about transforming this into a consumer packaged goods industry and building a relationship with consumers, and to be able to build strong foundations for the future of companies, because it's not all just going to be about the amount of product you can bring to market in this next chapter.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. That's a great answer. So thank you. So Bethany, why don't we talk about how you entered into your cannabis journey, and tell us about the services that Brightfield offers and why it's so important for a firm like Brightfield to exist in this burgeoning space.
Yeah, well, my journey into cannabis is definitely an interesting one. I feel like everyone has a very interesting journey into cannabis.
Absolutely.
You don't end up in this industry for nothing. But my background was in mainstream CPG market research. I used to work with a company called Euromonitor, and I really focused on emerging markets, or emerging market research, really trying to size and understand some of the most complicated markets that are out there. Fast moving markets in Latin America, new and emerging categories. I used to cover things like telecom in Africa and things like that. So I really love and thrived on these emerging markets. And cannabis is certainly the mother of all emerging markets. When we first started this company back in 2015, it was the most crazy, fast-moving, incredibly fragmented, incredibly nuanced market that was out there, and it really kind of seemed to me as kind of this, a prize of all emerging markets, right? One of the most challenging that was out there, and from my perspective as a researcher, I really approached this as from the lens of identifying, approaching and identifying how can you actually take a look at a market that's this complex? And we've always taken a multi-source approach to our data collection and our data sourcing here. From all of my background and experience, I certainly believe that in markets that are this kind of fragmented, fast-moving, and nuanced, there's never going to be like one magical data source that's going to give you the answer to all of your questions. So you have to pull in from as many different resources as is humanly possible, pull all of these different data data sources together and triangulate those to be able to get this full kind of 360-degree view that will help people make really actionable decisions on the market and really understand the market.
Do
So
you
that's kind
worry
of
about the about data is really important. I wonder if you could speak about this. How do you account for whether the data that you're analyzing is accurate or not,
Mhm,
whether it can be believed or not?
mhm.
I'm sorry to jump in, but I think that's
Yeah,
an
no,
important
please do.
question.
It's great.
Yeah.
No, it's a really great question because your analysis is only as going to be as good as kind of the data that you're pulling it from. So on the one side, you can get better data by pulling in multiple different data sources to be able to see. And if you're finding the same trend in 2 or 3 data sources, then you can validate that even if there's a margin of error attached to each one of those. If you're finding outliers and you can't confirm those in other different places, that helps to identify, okay, that might not be, something that I want to put a lot of stock in. So being able to have this kind of this ability to pull data together, triangulate and validate those in messy data sources, you find that the truth is really in the middle. Now, what's really important about harnessing messy data, which is, a lot of what we do at Brightfield, is taking data that's out there and harnessing it, and the approach there is really important to be able to take your sampling strategy very seriously and understand each data source and what it is and what it actually reflects. So at Brightfield, we pull in everything from, consumer surveys that are very strongly balanced, on, again, census data using kind of best in class methodologies there to ensure that we get a very accurate and objective view of who the consumer is, what they're buying, what they're communicating, what they're looking for out of their products, get things like incidence rates, get things like growth rates over time out of those consumers. We can take other data sets that are really out there in the world. And in this era right now that we are in, there's so much data that is out there in the world that is just kind of waiting to be harnessed to be able to be triangulated into insights. Now, we also, in addition to our consumer data, we also collect, digital menu data, for example, where we can collect data that's published on, on the web, and be able to pull that in and harness that using natural language processing, using kind of data tagging and, and smart machine learning and AI algorithms to be able to kind of craft that data, understanding what the sample is, and kind of craft that towards and clean that and direct that towards the inputs that we need to understand. Similarly, we can do the same thing with social listening data. There's so much out there. It's the world's biggest focus group, right? People are talking and talking and talking about, new products that they're interested in, or why they're using cannabis, why they, love or hate different things. What's kind of the next big thing in there? And, one of the things that we do at Brightfield is really kind of harness that level of data and pull that into our analysis and understanding of the market and kind of that trajectory of what's coming and what's next.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's an industry that really needs data.
Absolutely.
You're drowning, not you, but the industry is drowning in it. The question is, what data can they trust and what data is reliable? One thing I wanted to ask for sure is who are your clients when you look, who are, not specifically, but just generally, who are the people, who are the types of companies that come to you and say, I need greater insight into my market or into my business? Who are those people generally?
Yeah, so we work with a wide range of different companies, from some of the largest, MSOs, LPs, and companies, in the world. And here, a lot of their data and their marketing strategies are really kind of powered by Brightfield data. And it's been a real pleasure working with, many of these companies and having the ability to provide that data that will allow them to make strong data-driven decisions. Right. We also work with a lot of brands, in the space, having a strong portfolio of consumer and brand health data. We are able to help marketers at these brands, cannabis brands. We do a lot of work in the CBD space as well, working with many of those top brands in the space to understand those consumers and brands, in the landscape there. We also work with a lot of startups as well who are, turning to our data to be able to help build their kind of brand strategies, their market entry strategies, and things like that. So companies really use us for branding, marketing, support data to help support that, their marketing efforts, as well as for their strategic planning and product development roadmaps, being able to take that product development, that national expansion strategy, and be able to build out a really national data-driven solution is something that we really pride ourselves in.
So I know one of my best friends is a market researcher, and she's been a really good friend of mine for the last 40 years. We were together at Apple. I just adore her. She's always, the thing I've always known about market researchers is they all have a lot of natural curiosity. They're trying to figure something out. So
Amen.
what is the nut that you're trying most interested in cracking in understanding the cannabis space? Is there something that keeps you up at night? Something that this wasn't on one of our pre-approved list of questions. But
no, it's a great one.
I'm just wondering, what it is that you really are dying to know better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of questions in cannabis. One of the things that I love as you mentioned, a very curious market researcher, is there's no shortage of questions to be looking into and tracking kind of where is the consumer landscape going? Where is kind of the product landscape going? It's kind of ever evolving in here. The big question for all of us watching cannabis is, to keep kind of playing out, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps down the line, what's happening from a national level or a federal level, when it comes to cannabis, and what are all the implications of that, right? There's so many kind of implications of that I think most people aren't really thinking through, in terms of if, whenever we actually get to federal legalization, what happens, what tactically happens there, and what are kind of all of the, the trickle down effects in there. And certainly if, that interstate commerce effort, gets approved in there, what are all the trickle down effects there? Because there will be many. So those are some of the big things that I will be interested to see what kind of unfolds in the years ahead in here, for sure.
And is there room for all of these brands in the marketplace, do you think? Or
no, there are so many brands in the market right now. And, and when we look at the landscape on the, on the West Coast, for example, California is a really good example. Right now, California is having, a very difficult time. They are blessed with way too many really great products and really great brands. There's some really fantastic brands that are in the market there right now. We did a study, I believe it was last year, middle of last year, on brand health of California brands, and the consumer response was basically all of the products were really good. They really liked all the products. There were some of the, best in class, incredible innovations, incredible, some of the best branding, cannabis branding in the world, hands down, in a lot of these, small to mid-sized players, but there's just so many of them that they can't compete, and they can't, scale as a business in there. California has a lot of its challenges with the, black market and taxation and, and things like that as well. But there's just so many of them that, we are seeing more consolidation in the market. We, in kind of these markets east of the Mississippi, they're kind of building from scratch and, more with a more condensed product landscape in there. But there'll always be a place for some craft components or some craft brands, in these markets. But there is a lot more. There are a lot more brands, unfortunately, than will be able to survive. Which, again, is unfortunate, because there are so many great products there and so many great brands that have been established.
So if somebody came to you and said, "I want to get into the cannabis business. I've got money." I remember when I was dating somebody many years ago, she was a banker in the wine industry, and she would say, "Do you know how to make a small fortune in the wine business?" And I would say no, and she said, "Start with a large fortune." So I think the same thing is true here. It's like people have money, they want to get into cannabis. So if you were going to give them advice, what would you focus on? What would you have them focus on in terms of a product that would be able to sustain itself in the marketplace.
Yeah. I mean, when you're looking at the branded product space, I think that the key is to having a very kind of tight value proposition and really understanding who your consumer is and why your product is different. And having a very clear path of how are you going to get this message to the consumer and how is it going to resonate with your consumer? How are you going to get this message to your bud tenders? How is it going to resonate with those bud tenders? What is that path to, you creating a great product and you building a loyal consumer? There's so much of the product development and these companies that think that they have a great product and they have a great idea and they have, maybe great packaging in there, and that consumers are just going to adopt it and it's going to be great, right? That can work if the market is, if you're just trying to get a small piece of a lot of growth in there. But if you're duking it out in a very competitive market that has, a minimal amount of growth right now, that is more stable growth right now, you really have to know how you're going to get this great product and this great positioning into a loyal consumer base, right? And build that loyal consumer base. If you don't see that path in there, it's not going to happen. So only invest in a company if you believe that path, right?
Right, exactly. Right. No matter how much you might want it to happen, it's not going to happen. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Exactly. So what are the business challenges that your clients are facing?
Yeah.
What are the major ones that they're facing?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges that, our clients are facing. Cannabis is not for the faint of heart. I'll put it that way. I think, in the California market and kind of the West Coast markets and the Canadian market as well, these are becoming very densely populated, and, densely populated markets. And, brands really have to, to fight it out amongst each other. There's a lot of, in most markets, in most CPG markets, there's kind of an 80-20 rule in terms of the largest players making up about 80% of the market, and the top 20% making up 80% of the market. And we don't see that in cannabis yet. Even maybe in some of these large east of the Mississippi US markets, but they're very fragmented markets, and they're growing. They're putting up pretty significant growth rates, but not at the pace of the new entrants coming into the space. So it's very, very densely competitive. Because there's a lot of capital flowing into it, it kind of artificially pumps up the market. So companies that are losing money don't necessarily shut down, at the pace that you would think from Econ 101, right? Type of mentality. Exactly. Econ 101 is essentially, new companies will keep coming in until nobody makes any money, and then they start falling out and everything evens out. But so far, we're not seeing that, those companies drop out of a lot of these markets yet. Some of them are. There's a few, there are some that are. There's also a lot of them that are trying to keep taking their places, in there. But it makes it hard for, the larger companies to see growth, and for the newer companies to try to compete. So it's that densely competitive field. Everyone really needs to be focusing on kind of outperforming the market in there, and really how they're going to build that loyal consumer base and really kind of shift in consumers' minds. I mean, there's been a really radical shift in the minds of consumers over the last 10 years, from cannabis being something you buy in a bag from your dealer that doesn't have a brand, that in no way, shape, or form resembles the same decision tree.
Dealers are not trying to cultivate. We're not trying to cultivate brands, right?
It did not resemble the same decision tree that you would have when you're going to buy a packaged beverage, right? In here. And now this is transformed into a CPG industry, but consumers don't yet have that level of brand loyalty in place, and are just kind of starting to get there in terms of like understanding brands and what they mean, and the loyalties and the affinities and things like that in most markets. So but that staying power, that first mover advantage that everybody was so kind of keen to have, it doesn't actually mean anything if you don't cultivate that long lasting consumer base or have some other kind of economic moat on your business.
Yeah. So Bethany, just a couple more questions for you. You've been super great to be on the show. I really appreciate it. So what are the challenges of being a woman in leader in cannabis? I've asked this because it's not like I ask men what are the challenges of being a man, because I think that there are inherent advantages to being a man in virtually everything, right?
Yeah.
It's not fair, it's not right, but it's sort of like where we're at, and we want to even the playing field as much as we possibly can. So from your perspective, what are the challenges that you see as being a female leader in the space, and what advice will you give to other female leaders in the space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really similar to, being a female leader in a lot of categories. I mean, cannabis is very, very male dominated in a lot of ways. There are a lot of, really great women that are in positions of leadership, in this industry. And I think there's some great people that are really kind of forging the way in there, but it is a very male dominated industry. So I think having a good, kind of network of women to be able to work with, not being afraid to be the only woman in a room, or being a very small percentage of women going into a conference, or into meetings, or things like that. Being able to have that level of confidence, and not let it get to you. I think is the important part. Especially I've been in many a place where I have to kind of go work with, and kind of be able to pitch to, or be in a room with 80% men that are oftentimes 20 years older than me. So it's a different kind of environment, and that's okay. It's part of the world that we live in. But I think some great organizations have developed. There's always networking organizations, and it is by having a smaller base of women in strong leadership roles, you have the ability to network more with those women as well. So
yep.
I do have to say, while there's many men in positions of leadership in this industry, there's most of the men working in this industry are actually quite lovely, in many extents as well. So I won't say that I've it's a particularly toxic industry or environment. I think there are many far more toxic ones. But I think it's interesting.
Yeah, mercenary, arms seller. Yeah,
but
those would be worse,
roles,
probably.
Yeah, we've, at Brightfield, we have a lot of women in leadership roles, throughout our organization. And I think that women, there's, stereotypes around both, but, women may approach problems in different ways, which can be very valuable. And,
Absolutely.
the way that we think about things, and the way that we approach solving problems. And I think that's helped us at our ethos, and at Brightfield, to kind of approach problems and approach data, and how to build our products in a bit of different ways as well.
Right. Well, as you know, market researchers are near and dear to my heart. So
yeah.
I'm really happy that you're able to come on. So Bethany, can you tell people how they can reach you if they're interested in learning more about you and Brightfield, and how would that happen?
So please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to Brightfield. We have a contact us page on our website, so feel free to fill that out. You can reach me directly at my name, Bethany Gomez, at brightfieldgroup.com, and I'd look forward to speaking with you.
Wonderful. Well, Bethany, thank you so very, very much. Really great to have you on the show today, and thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks, Steve.